everyone, my name is Gabby. I am the owner of Cooking with Gabby, a virtual cooking school for kids, tweens, and teens, the place to build confidence in the kitchen and beyond. And I'm so excited to be working with you and cooking up some delicious food together. Before we get started, I definitely want to share some tips for success in the kitchen. So we're going to be talking about how to dress for cooking, keeping your station clean so that you can keep your mind organized and your food tasting better, washing produce, some knife skills, and mise en place. So let's get started. Hello up there. We're going to talk about how to dress for cooking. So as you can see, I've tied my hair back. If you've got long hair, you want to tie it back to keep it out of your face, to keep it out of any flames if you're working at the stove, and of course to keep it out of the food that you're cooking. You're also going to want to wear an apron, whether it's an apron that ties around the waist like this or one that comes up around the neck. And if, in fact, a full body apron will help protect your shirt from getting stains on it. Most importantly, I really want you to have a kitchen towel nearby. I like to tuck it into my apron strings like this. And how I do that is I take my apron and I crisscross the strings behind me, and then I tie it in front. That way I naturally create almost like a belt to tuck my kitchen rag into. This serves several purposes. If I get my hands wet, I can wipe them on the kitchen rag. And if I spill something on the counter, I can wipe it with this rag as well. So those are some ways for how to dress for the kitchen. I also highly recommend wearing shoes if that's something that's allowed in your house. Now let's talk about mise en place. Mise en place. That is a French phrase that means to put in place. And it literally means that. It means getting your ingredients and your cooking materials out before you start the cooking process so that it goes much more smoothly once you do start. Imagine being on the stove, or in front of the stove rather, and realizing that you still didn't chop your parsley that you need to add to the dish. And so the stove's on and you're looking for your cutting board and your knife, and you still have to wash your parsley, and meanwhile the food on the stove is burning. So that's not what we want to have happen. We want to do things methodically so that our cooking process is more enjoyable. So how do you get started with mise en place? Well, you're going to look at your recipe and read through the recipe first. You're lucky if your recipe has a materials list, which I included for you on the grocery list that you have. So that will show you all the cooking tools that you need. Now, you also want to just read through the steps of the recipe. For example, I have a soup recipe in front of me, and the first step says, trim the ends off of the leeks. So I know that I'm going to need a cutting board and a knife, and I can get that set up before I start. Then it says cook in a large pot or Dutch oven, ... And so I know I'm going to need a large pot, and I can get that out and put it on my stove. I'm probably going to need some kind of spoon or spatula as well. Then it says using an immersion blender, puree soup until desired consistency. And so I know I'm going to need to get out my immersion blender as well. Now this isn't necessarily the recipe we're making together, but I'm just showing you how to read through a recipe and in the process set your kitchen up for success. The other thing you'll want to do is look, of course, at the ingredients and take those out as well. It can be a lot of things to keep out at once. And so one way to kind of contain some of your ingredients for your mise en place is to put them on a baking sheet and keep all your ingredients for one recipe here. That way they're contained, they're on your countertop, or maybe they're on a table that's close to your kitchen so that they can be somewhat out of the way, but still easily accessible for when you need them. Does that make sense? Please email me if you have any questions. I would love to clarify this for you. Your cooking station. This area is your pride and joy. If you ever work in a restaurant one day, you'll learn the importance of keeping it extremely clean. And if you don't, and you're working somewhere where they don't emphasize that, I recommend working somewhere else. Cleanliness around food is so important. We don't want raw eggs from baking to get into our salad that we're gonna eat without cooking it. That can be dangerous. We also don't want a lot of clutter in front of us because it can prevent us from being organized and doing a good job with what we're cooking. So sometimes things get a little messy, and that's okay. The important part is to have your kitchen rag nearby to clean up the mess, and in between one task and the next, to clear off your space, put away ingredients you're not using, and take dirty dishes to the sink. Even if you don't wash them until later, at least they're not scattered about your workstation and they're all in one place over by the sink. They say that a clean station is an organized mind. So let's keep it that way. Washing produce. You may have heard to wash your lettuce or to wash your apple before you eat it, and that's because it can have some kind of dirt or bacteria on the outside from people holding it or just from traveling from where it grew to your supermarket to your house. So it's always smart to give it a nice rinse and even a little scrub with your fingers before you eat it or cook with it. Now, an apple may be obvious because we actually eat the skin, but what about something like a lemon or a clementine or an onion? Well, I definitely recommend washing those too. It may not be as common practice, but it should be, because when we cut into the lemon, we're cutting through the skin and then our knife is touching the inside, which we eat, or squeeze onto some dish, which we then eat. So it's important to wash that as well. Even your banana you can wash. Knife skills. In front of me, I have 3 different kinds of knives. This smaller knife is called a paring knife, and it's excellent for cutting something like cherry tomatoes or grapes in half. This knife is a chef's knife, and they're usually between 6 and 8 or maybe 9 inches long, and it's great for doing so many things like cutting larger vegetables or cutting up chicken and so much more. This knife with the what are called teeth, these edges here, is a bread knife. And so this is the best knife for slicing bread, and it's also called a serrated knife. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to hold the knife with this chef's knife. Rather than holding it back here, we actually want to hold it up close to the blade, and I have my index finger and my thumb on the blade. Now, whatever hand you're not cutting with, whether you're a righty or a lefty, you're gonna wanna use to stabilize the food that you're cutting. For example, if I was cutting this apple, I would use this hand to stabilize the apple. What else is the non-cutting hand doing? Well, a whole lot. You're definitely gonna make a claw position to tuck your fingers underneath so that you don't risk cutting them. Ouch. The other thing that they do is they are actually like a ruler for your food. If you want to make even slices, you make a cut and then you move your hand back and you make another cut. So this hand is keeping the measurements and your cutting hand is doing the cutting. You can use your knuckles as the guide, and your knife can actually go right up against your knuckles without the risk of cutting your fingers because they're tucked underneath. Now, the cutting motion depends a little bit on what you're cutting, But in general, it's a nice, easy, gliding motion, moving forward rather than up and down like this. So take a knife at home with the supervision of an adult if you need one, and practice this motion. And also practice the feeling of having the knife up against your knuckles and tucking your fingers and your thumb underneath. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, click like below and subscribe. And please stay in touch. I am on social media at Gaby's Cooking Club. Have a good day.